All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's do the pick'em. That's my YouTube voice. Subscribe to my YouTube. I'm trying to reach 100K. I'm so close, guys. I'm so close. All right, play-ins. How'd the play-ins go? I thought KC would win. They did... As winning and losing is very black and white, but they did the least amount of winning possible in this matchup. They got smoked, rolled up into a blunt, and this is the perfect time to remind you guys that I am coaching North America. So, like, you know, I don't claim this. Nevertheless, coming into the tournament, I did have higher hopes for KC. They definitely, dropped the ball. KC changed identity completely. In interviews, they were getting smoked in scrims by the better teams, and then suddenly decided to pivot. And then they came into the tournament with no strengths and all of the weaknesses that were pronounced while leveraging their strengths. They no longer had like that... pressure through bot lane. They no longer had the team fighting. They looked desperate, and they tried to play early game centric, and they lost all form coming into the tournament at all. That shit was crazy. I don't know, like the level of the form Kana showed as well was on par, in my opinion, with what he showed when he played against Oscarini. Maybe just one of those things where maybe KC just can't deal with the lights being too bright. And then you have, of course, Team Liquid on their side. Even though I think that, I kept saying that throughout the year I was disappointed because I had way higher expectations for Team Liquid. This is still a team where Quid and CoJJ, in particular, in my opinion, have found really, really high peaks. And these are guys that just perform under pressure way better than they do during regular seasons. CoJJ is self-explanatory. Like, this guy is an absolute legend, right? One of the GOATs of North America that won Worlds, of course, with the LCK. And, of course, Quid, you know, when we think of Quid, why he was so hyped in the off-season was, of course, his run with the 100 Thieves. And 100 Thieves went from being, a bottom-tier team into Dokla comes in, and then suddenly everything gets revamped. And once again, Quid was a big reason. Quid was one of the #1 targets in all of the off-season, and Team Liquid managed to sign him. And I think that he finally is paying his worth. And with their exit, I don't think that this 3-0 does them justice. They had very competitive games against T1, and, fair play. And finally, I think a very, very strong shout-out to Team Liquid's coaching staff. Led by Spawn, I do think that this coaching staff is just brilliant. In terms of preparation, night and day, KC didn't know who Team Liquid was, but even worse, they didn't know who they themselves was. And I have to say, at this point, Reaper has coached 3 really, really talented rosters back to back to back, and they have had very, very disappointing final series. If you guys remember his exit from C9, this was, we had the Jojo Pune exit, right? The Jojo Pune, you guys remember when Blabber and Jojo Pune played LeBlanc in Italy? And then, of course, the next year, following year as well, where they had a very disappointing exit. It comes to question, the prep work. Because in the end, Reaper, I think that pre his time, before he went to Japan, his track record on C9 was very, very strong. I lost to that C9, Reaper C9, when he was tinkering with the roster, with Golden Glue, and of course Svenskeren and Jensen. You guys remember that, then, of course, that C9 was known for always doing damage at internationals. More damage than the top dog of the region. Even if you go further back, Reaper as a player, I looked up to Reaper as a player super much. He was legendary as a player. So, as I say this, I don't want to discredit his entire career, I don't think it makes sense, Anyhow. We continue. Knockouts are open. T1 made it. As you all know, I've complained about the format a lot, where BLG, for winning first stand and being the #1 seed, they get to play against T1. Because for winning first stand, their second seed insta-qualifies to the tournament in Top Esports, which means that they can't play against the 4th seed, which is an absolute joke. Let's be honest. Whichever team in the LCK would have been in the lower brackets, in the play-ins, would have probably made it. Whether it was Genji, HLE, T1, it still would have been a disastrous matchup. My solution to this is very easy and elegant. Teams in Pool 1 should be allowed to choose their first round opponent, and then you fill out the rest of the bracket. Like, imagine if BLG and G2 actually got to choose their opponent. I think the bracket will then kind of solve itself. You would have Top Esports versus HLE, maybe BLG versus Furia, maybe a G2 versus Team Secret Wales, and then LYON versus T1, and then you would have, you know, a bracket, you know, that actually represents a reward for being in Seed 1. So that part is very silly. But nevertheless, BLG versus T1, LYON versus Furia, HLE versus Team Secret Wales, G2 versus Top Esports. Let's fill out the damn bracket. BLG versus T1, this is a big one. I have hyped up BLG a lot because I do think that in terms of what the meta is, I do think that they're going to be super sharp. T1 as a team, even though they've shown that they are flawed, they have also shown how good their team fighting can be and how good their individual mechanics can be and how clutch they can be. We've seen owner smites, we've seen carriers engages, we've seen absolutely bodying team fights, and even Doran today was winning lane quite heavily. But we've also seen a lot of mistakes that I think that they won't get away with. They have gotten caught in between a lot of segments of the game. They give away a lot of kills, and they take fights that they don't need to take. In a world where they are capable of outplaying, they invite situations that can be much harder to outplay against a BLG. The nervous part about BLG is that we haven't seen them play now for a solid month almost, 3 weeks, and you don't know what kind of form they're going to be bringing. But I think if we see a continuation of what we've seen in the year, I do think that BLG, and also with Knight's form and Bin's form, I do think that they are primed to actually do a lot of damage to the solo lanes of T1. For those who want to have the historical context of BLG versus T1, you know, when it comes to MSI specifically, Shun and On have always done really well into T1 when it comes to MSI in particular. Worlds is kind of a different beast because I do think that you get challenged a lot more in terms of how you handle, you know, the pressure of the day-to-day, the logistics, the challenge of having interview after interview, and the challenge of scrimming less and solo queuing less and dealing with different food. And the thing is, T1 deal with this bullshit all year round, you know, because of how popular they are. In terms of how much press they need to do, how much interviews they need to do, how much commercials they need to do. They are probably the most overworked squad by far in the world because of how commercialized they are. When it comes to the World Championship, they are really, really used to it. And of course, they run a level of confidence that you cannot recreate outside of what T1 is. That you can never doubt them when it comes to the BO5s. But I have to say, from a strict gameplay perspective, and with MSI being a little bit different, because MSI is a lot more consistent in the output, I would say, in the sense that teams get a lot more time to prepare. The patches aren't heavy-handed coming into MSI, usually into Worlds. Usually we have big changes, whether it's like AD mid-meta being changed and so forth. Here, teams actually get to scrim, they get to settle. There's no jet lag question, there's no issues at all, there's no logistical challenge. You just sit and grind and you boot camp for 3 weeks straight, and you're ready to go. You get to showcase yourself in the best way possible, especially because it starts with BO5s. So with that, all that being said, I think T1's biggest strength is not something that they can leverage easily. BLG versus T1 historically, we've had last year, 2025, obviously BLG was very weak with Beishwan. You guys remember that. The year before that, BLG beat T1 twice at MSI. This was 24 when Genji won the finals against BLG. And then in 23, you had, of course, BLG beating T1. This was when T1, you know, had this issue where they couldn't win summer finals. They couldn't win world finals. They couldn't win spring finals. And it was kind of haunting them that they couldn't push it over the finish line. And this was the powerful JDG that won, of course, the MSI. And I wanted to highlight that because if there is a super jungle duo that during certain segments in the year and certain segments of their career have been capable of competing with owner and carrier, it's been these two. Because in terms of experience together, there is nobody that comes close to owner and carrier. It's only Shun and On in terms of how much they've played together. There's nobody else that comes close in that discussion. So with all that being said, I do think BLG is a lot more fit for the meta, and I do expect their bot lane to actually be able to withstand the pressure of Pays and Carrier. But the main thing that we need to pay attention to is T1 seem to have a very good understanding of how to draft their bot lane matchups, and this is where BLG can fall into traps. But On has a very extensive champion pool, and he can be very devious because the strength here of Viper is that he can play in and out of the role that ADC is where we have a lot of ADCs playing a more supportive role with the Ziggs and the Jins and the Ashes. I do also believe that Viper is the type of guy that can easily play an Ezreal Karma lane and decimate and so forth. Even though I don't think that Viper has been important to BOG's success, I think he's the one that takes the smallest role on the team. I do think that Viper is a player that you cannot underestimate because he is just an elite level player. So the clash of styles here is the most crucial one, and I do believe that BOG's style in terms of how he approaches the meta is the one that of course is the most powerful. So BOG is going to be my winner here. LYON versus Furia, this is a tough one for me to say. I do think that stylistically, from just peeking at a couple Furia games, I think the pace of how Furia, you know, ramp up and attack can be something that is a stylistic, very fun matchup. I do think that the LYON is going to be able to just choose their fights against Furia very cleverly. I do think that Furia mechanically, if you invite them into skirmishes, I think that Furia is going to beat them. I think that LYON needs to be very, very careful. They need to play judo. They need to actually do Brazilian jiu-jitsu. They cannot be in situations where they swing with Furia here. They shouldn't swing with them. They shouldn't fight with them. I expect LYON to play a very methodical game with very, very low kills, just taking the air out of the game to just make Furia as uncomfortable as possible. And that's LYON's strength. And I do believe in Furia's game style a little bit more in the current meta because of the pacing and how bloody this MSI has been. I think that Furia is a lot more suited for that. And that was a big part of why I always said coming into this tournament that I think that Team Liquid is a team that can do more damage as an underdog than LYON, because LYON is a team that really plays a very slow, methodical game. And I do think that Team Liquid has more upset potential because of that. But in this particular matchup, I do think that LYON is going to be powerful enough to withstand the onslaught of Furia. But I think this can be very close. And I repeat, I come at this with very little knowledge, and this is a question that we cannot avoid because, of course, we are making the pick'ems, right? We're making the pick'ems, so we just have to pick something here. So I'm going to go with LYON. HLE versus Team Secret Wales. I'm sorry, Team Secret Wales, but HLE is demonic. G2 versus Top Esports. Top Esports is a team that everyone views for their international performances and laughs at them. But I do think that the context of this team is very different. I do think that their rookies are very talented in Zweyan, their top laner, and Feng Yue is fantastic. The rookies that they brought in are really, really good. And Tian, Jakilov, and Cream regionally were in the conversation of being a top 3 in their position throughout the entire competition. There was a period there where Top Esports looked kind of weaker. They went on a lose streak before playoffs, but all in all, I do think that Top Esports is a team that is getting underestimated. But my main concern is not necessarily that they're going to choke, but I do think the fact that they have 2 players that come into this tournament inexperienced is something that matters. MSI is always the biggest test of experience and how you deal with meta shifts, because this is something that Top Esports didn't deal with super well in the beginning. But I do think that you need to look out for Cream, because Cream as a player is currently having probably this split and this year has been like the best, most complete in his career, because I do think that he has become more of a veteran. Rather than a melee-only player, he's the type of player that has a very, very well-rounded pool. I do think that G2 is a team that preps very well, and they have known about this matchup for very long, so they can study Top Esports. I do think, though, that G2's volatility is something that, in terms of their throws and how volatile they can be in later parts of the game that we saw regionally, this is something that they can't give to Top Esports, because Top Esports is the type of team, you give them a finger, they'll take a hand. They are very, very sharp and very, very good in terms of their decision-making, how snappy they are. So this is something that G2 needs to be very, very careful with. This is the type of matchup where I would favor Top Esports in G2 if we had a little bit more information and it was further into the tournament. But G2 coming into the tournament, I do think that I'm going to favor G2 ever so slightly. But I think this is very close. We have, of course, the detail that Jakilov internationally is someone that doesn't perform, and that can also be a problem. And I also expect G2 to be a lot better internationally post boot camp than they were regionally, because obviously I was always fighting against that math when people were like, yo, KC took G2 to 5 games, so they are better than Gen G as well then. It's like, no. It's like G2 is a whole ass different team when they play internationally in terms of how they space out and how they ramp things out. We never saw the version of G2 that we saw at first stand in the LEC, because the version of G2 that was at first stand all of them just peaked individually at the same time. And if G2 can amount to that again, there's potential to do very, very well at this tournament. But to be able to achieve that is very difficult, especially because everyone gets a very solid practice block. But knowing this is the opening match, I'm going to favor G2 here. And we continue. BLG versus HLE, because I do think that HLE and BLG is going to win. You know, here, I can make arguments for both. Honestly, I can make arguments for both very easily. I know people that don't watch LPL, they really underrate BLG, and a part of me has a certain bias here because I don't want people that don't watch the LPL to be right. I genuinely just want BLG to showcase how good they are, and I want a series that goes to 5, and I want fireworks, you know. I just want both of these teams to be in really, really good form, and that's what I am hyped about the most. I have called BLG my winner, so I'm just going to stick to it, but I can easily make arguments for HLE too. I think this is a coin toss. I am going to just flip it and pick BLG. We're going to have the guy called I Will Tencent, and Tomato Tencent is going to write up a comment right now, you know, his 1,000th comment about my bias towards the LPL. Classic. We have like these stooges that are reoccurring characters in the comment section. I enjoy it, so please keep going. We continue. T1 versus Furia. I think T1 wins that. Top Esports versus Team Secret Wales. I think they win that. Top Esports versus LYON. I think Top Esports win that. T1 and then T1 versus Top Esports is a classic. And then the HLE versus T1 rematch. I don't know. There's something freaky about this one. My finger wants to take me to HLE, but there's something in my gut that is just like, it's churning, you know? It's churning. Because obviously we have a matchup. We saw it at Road to MSI. But there's something about going through so many BO5s that is going to harden T1 in a way at an international. This is a weird gut call. A rational pick'em is never right. So I will go for the irrationality, and I'm going to take T1 to beat HLE in the lower bracket, and then BOG to become the winner. And there you have it. Let's take a look. Let's check in on my crystal ball. This is probably like the worst crystal ball I've ever done. A really, really horrible crystal ball. I misunderstood some of these. Okay. Renekton, locked in, dialed in. That's a dub. Renekton was picked in every single series played. Good job. For MSI playins, which pro will have the highest KDA? This was very close. FaZe won out because he popped off against Team Liquid. But also he died a lot in the Lucian game. So, double-edged sword. For MSI playins, which team will be the shortest game duration? God bless for game 3. Team Liquid were broken apart. My pick'em is disgusting. So basically, Kalista's already cooked. Team lost with Kalista. That sucks. Yunara, I think T1 played it once, so that one. This I misunderstood completely. I thought I had to pick a champion that would have the highest kill in one game. So this is just in the toilet. Jesus Christ, this is a horrible pick. Which pro will get the most first bloods? FaZe is in there at least. He has one. The reason I picked FaZe, I already mentioned. Heavy artillery, FaZe. Least amount of kills in one game. I really thought Team Liquid would... Like, my idea of this was which team will face off against T1. Because I thought T1 has the highest chance of smoking somebody so hard they like perfect game them. So that was my spread, and that's why I didn't pick Relove. But Relove got deep crossed. Which champion will be banned the most? Damn, Vi is currently #1. Amazing. This is obviously off. Yeah, my read was that I thought that mages will have a higher proclivity, but the thing is, this is just a bad choice, because if I thought about this a little more, I would come to the same conclusion, but Poppy, Lee Sin, Naafiri being really good in the meta makes Jarvan less of a threat. That was just a miss. And Kalista was a read of mine where I thought, okay, maybe just the good players will play it, but it turns out that everyone is giving Carry a Bard, so there you have it. But I feel like this is something that's gonna drop off. This is gonna drop off big time, I think, because we have a lot of games ahead of us. So let's see. Well, let's see how the tournament goes down. I'm really excited, and there you have it.